So what we're going to do is I'm not going to record in a video the notes that you wrote down that talked about properties of equality, but what I am going to include in our video is how to solve problems. So first thing I want to do is talk about your equation card. And the equation card starts off with distribute to remove parentheses. That's your number one thing. If you don't have parentheses, you don't do that step. You move on. If you do, you practice what we did last night. Next, you look to see if there's like terms on a side that you can combine. Okay, and as we go through this example, you'll see some issues that I saw kids are confusing. If I see like terms on either side of the equals, that's like terms, and the answer is no, it's not going to work that way. They have to be on the same side. Then it says do inverse operations, and it specifically mentions addition or subtraction to get constants on the right. Then do inverse operations, again specifically addition or subtraction to get variables on the left. Now, we actually can have some freedom here, but the reason why I'm saying constants on the right and variables on the left is if we just have a plan of attack, we don't need to question, Nick, what we're doing. Just like some of you, when it says more than or less than, some of you wanted to write more than exactly the way that things were written instead of realizing it was a switcher phrase. However, with addition, we have the commutative property says you can swap the order of what you add and the answer won't change. Unfortunately, if you get in the habit of sometimes switching when it says than and sometimes not, then when you are trying to do subtraction like subtracted from or less than and you don't switch the order, now you have the answer is going to be wrong. So it's really important that you develop patterns that you stick to and you don't make tons of exceptions because then you'll be confused as to what to do. Next, it says do inverse operations. That's multiplying or dividing with the coefficient to get the variable alone. So now we're done solving, and our job would be to check your solution by substituting the value in for the variable in the original equation to see if you have a true statement. Your answer should be variable equals number. Now we do have freedom to write it number equals variable because if you understand what equality means, that if those two are equal, it doesn't matter what sides they appear on. But if we just always come up with a plan of attack, we're going to be good. Now, where some of you got hit with this, step 7 on quiz that you took, is you did not have the variable as part of the answer to these equations. That is mandatory, that the variable is part of the answer when you're given an equation that contains a variable. When you choose the variable in a word problem, that does not get part of your answer. Okay? All right, so let's take our problem. Our first one, again, directions are just solving with 8 plus 4d equals 5d. So what I'm going to do is just kind of go through the steps on our card, and we're going to go exactly what it says. Now, again, there's more than one way to solve all problems. Okay? So, do I have any parentheses that I need to remove?
No.
Okay, so step 1 I don't have to worry about. Do I have like terms on each side? And before you say anything, this is what I'm talking about. Are 8 and 4D like terms?
No.
No, so I can't do anything there. 5D, there's not even more than one term, so there's nothing I can do there. So step 2 did not take place in this problem. So now it says do inverse operations to get constants on the right. So what's the constant in this problem? 8. So what this is saying is that we want to get the constant to go that direction. So what's the inverse of 8? Negative 8. It's the inverse operation. Now I'm not going to write them underneath here because I can't combine them, right? They're not like terms. So I'm just going to write it slightly off to the side like that. What ends up happening, you guys should be doing this. This is part of your notes. Oh, shoot, sorry. You know what's funny though, but you heard me talking and you didn't write down anything. Okay? You knew what the question was, you wrote it down. Okay, guys, don't argue. This just shows how handicapped you guys can feel when somebody doesn't tell you exactly what to do. Unfortunately, nobody's going to tell you exactly what to do when you're taking your quiz. So you got to learn how to stand on your own 2 feet and go, oh, I need to be writing this down. I apologize that it wasn't up and running. So remember we said in our notes that we're going to use properties of equality. Well, this property is the subtraction property of equality. I'm doing subtracting 8 from both sides of the equation. Because see, here's where the equal sign is. Okay? So the result of that is 4D equals 5D minus 8. Now step 4 says do inverse operations, either using addition or subtraction to get variables on the left. So the variable that we're going to try to move left would be the 5D, because he's not on the left. So what am I going to do to move him to the left? I'm going to subtract not 5, but 5D, and the idea is it has to happen from both sides. Otherwise, it's not equal. That is subtraction property of equality. And again, what you're seeing right now is exactly what I should be seeing when you're working on your homework or working on a test. I'm looking for all of this. So on the left, the signs are different. Bigger number's negative, and 5 take away 4 is 1. So I get negative 1D equals, and in front of the 8 is a negative, so I have a negative 8. Step 5 says do inverse operations. That's either multiplication or division with the coefficient to get the variable alone. So I want to take a moment, since this has been something that people had forgotten about, is what is a coefficient. So we're going to do some little side notes over here. And I'm going to give us 3 examples. 2x, y over 6, 2/3 t. And what I want to do is to figure out what is the coefficient in each of these cases. So what's the coefficient for 2x? The coefficient for 2x is? The coefficient for 2x is? The coefficient for 2x is? Coefficient, folks. What's a coefficient? I forget is not an answer. What is the coefficient? We've already taken notes on this. Do you remember that? Obviously not. This is my concern, is that you guys are not going back to your notes and you're not reviewing and you're not learning the material. Okay? Of all the classes, you're the only one who hasn't been able to come up with an answer. Why? Janine? Nope. We're at 2x. Where does negative 8 come from? You guys aren't aware that 2 is the coefficient? X is a variable, folks. 2 is the coefficient because variable is already spoken for. What's the coefficient on y over 6? 6. What is the coefficient of 2/3 t? 2/3. Okay, you don't need to scream. Shh. Ladies and gentlemen, this is being recorded. I would suggest that you need to straighten up right now. Coefficient is the number being multiplied by or divided into the variable. You need to speak math language. Because if you can't speak the math language, then you have no idea what we're supposed to be doing. Step 5, do inverse operations, either multiplication or division with the coefficient to get the variable alone. What's the coefficient in my equation, negative 1d equals negative 8? Negative 1. So what math am I going to do that's the inverse of negative 1d? Okay, what does it say the operation choices are in step 5? I cannot add or subtract negative 1 with d, negative 1d. It's impossible. Negative 1 is multiplying with d, ladies and gentlemen. Therefore, the inverse would be dividing by negative 1. Here the signs are the same, so I'm going to get a positive and I get an 8. Step 6 says you need to check your solution. How to do that? Every time I see D in the original problem, I'm going to put in 8 and see if what I get on the left equals what's on the right. So I get 8. 4 times 8 is 32. 5 times 8 is 40. 8 plus 32 is 40. Since 40 equals 40, what that says is yes, D has to equal 8. All right, let's, oh, by the way, this last step we did with the dividing by -1, that is division property of equality. Okay, don't be surprised if I ask what property did you use to get from here to there on the next quiz that you take. So let's do another problem. This one's going to look a little different. We have 6n minus 1 equals 4n minus 5. So what's different about number 2 than what we had in number 1?
There's two.
Two what?
Like two other things. Like terms. There are like 3 numbers. There's one of them.
Okay. Step 1. Do we need to remove parentheses?
No.
No. Step 2. Do I have like terms on a side?
Yes.
6n and -1 are like terms?
No.
That's no, I don't have like terms on that side. 4n minus 5 are like terms?
No.
No, I can't do that. When I say like terms on a side, I mean on one side of the equals, not on what's on both sides. That's something completely different. What you were doing yesterday was combining like terms. They were all on one side because there was no equals. This with the equals, you look on the left side of the equals and the right side of the equals for like terms. All right, step 3. Do inverse operations, either adding or subtracting, to get constants on the right. So what's the constant on the left? -1. We want it to go this direction. So I'm supposed to do an inverse to what I see. So what's the inverse to subtracting 1? So I'm going to add 1 to both sides. That's your addition property of equality. I get 6n. The 1's cancel each other out, giving me a remainder of 0. And over on this side, I have 4n, and then the -5 and the +1. Signs are different, bigger numbers negative. I subtract, and I get a 4. Step 4. Do inverse operations, either addition or subtraction, to get variables on the left. Well, what's the variable on the left that I need to move? Or no, the variable that's not on the left that I need to move. I want everything to go where 6n is, so what is the term that I'm going to have to move? I'm going to have to move the 4n. I'm not going to move 6n to meet the 6n. The 6n is in the left. That's where we want him to be. It's the 4n that's not where we want it to be. What's the inverse for this 4n to make it jump ship to go to the left? I can't divide. I only have 2 operations available. I have addition or subtraction. I'm going to subtract 4n from both sides. Remember, this is not a guessing game. Look at that card, ladies and gentlemen. That's the whole point why we created this for you, is that you could constantly refer to it while you're working on homework or taking notes. You're not allowed to have it out during a test or a quiz. If you do, you'll take an automatic 0 on that quiz or test. You need to know these steps, but the more you go over them one by one, the more it's going to stick in your brain. So on the left side, I've got 4n or 6n take away 4n, so that gives me 2n. On the right side, all that's left is a -4. What do I do now? Step 5 says do inverse operations, either multiplication or division, to with the coefficient to get the variable alone. So what math is going on now between the coefficient and the variable? Multiplication. The inverse would be division. So we're going to divide by that coefficient, divide by that 2 on both sides. So the 2's give me 2 divided by 2 is 1, 1 times n is n. Signs are different, so the answer is negative. 4 divided by 2 is 2. So next I want to check this, make sure I did it right. So every time I see n in the original equation, I'm going to substitute in -2 and solve it out. And see if what I have on the left, does that equal what I have on the right? Oops. So what I get here is a negative 12 minus a 13, oh, sorry, minus a 1. And does that equal to negative 8 minus a 5? Well, negative 12 take away 1, signs are the same, so I add. I get negative 13. Signs are the same on the right, so I add, and I get negative 13. Since negative 13 equals itself, then the answer had to be n equals negative 2. We're going to try one more, and then you guys will have, oh, by the way, I forgot to write here. This was division property of equality. So when they're saying you're using properties of equality, these are what they're talking about. You're doing the same math on both sides. You show it, you show the operation, you show the number. Okay? Nothing's done in the head. I cannot grade in the head. All right, last example. 3x minus 7 equals 8x plus 23. So look at your equation and look at your equation card. What is the first step that we can take to solve this problem? Raise your hand. Shannon.
Step 3.
What are you going to do? Tell me specifically.
You move 7 to the right.
It says nothing on the card about moving. There's math that has to be done in order for the negative 7 to join up with the 23. But you got to tell me what that is.
Adding
What are you going to add to both sides?
7.
So we're going to add 7 to both sides. Notice I line up the like terms to make the math easier. So I get 3x equals 8x plus 30. KCD, what am I going to do next?
You're going to take 8x and you're going to do the inverse operation, so you're going to minus 8x to minus 8x.
Okay, so we're going to subtract that 8x from both sides. Signs are different over on the left. Bigger number's negative, so my remainder will be negative. 8x take away 3x is 5x. And then on the right side, I'm left with a 30. Notice the variable has not changed once. It doesn't change. Okay, Alexis, what's going to happen now? What's the next step? Alexis?
You divide negative 5x by negative 5.
Okay. Okay. Ooh, you scared me for a moment. One thing that I've noticed some kids do by accident is that they divide by the variable. You don't. It's only the coefficient. The variable stays put. So we're not doing any division or multiplication with the variable. That causes big problems. So we're going to divide by the coefficient only. And that gives me x equals, here the signs are different, so the answer is negative, and 30 divided by 5 is 6. So I'm going to go ahead and test this out and see if I did it right. So I have 3 times negative 6, that minus 7. And does that actually equal 8 times the negative 6 plus 23? So I get negative 18 minus 7, and I want to know if that's going to be equal to negative 48 plus 23. So on the left, the signs are the same, so I add. I get negative 25. On the right, the signs are different, so I'm going to subtract bigger numbers negative. And when I subtract, I get negative 25. Since negative 25 equals negative 25, that's true. That verifies that x equals negative 6. Now, what was the first property we used to solve this problem? The one that's in blue. Gabe. What's the property that we used of equality, the very first step that's in blue? Yeah. So whatever that operation is, that's addition, property of equality. Okay, and then the second operation that we did, Acacia? Say again? Yeah. When we subtracted 8x from both sides, oops, that's the subtraction property of equality. Okay, and then the purple step. Evan, what did we do? Now, isn't that funny? All three examples, we had division property of equality as the last step. We have more division property of equality than we would ever with multiplication as our last step, and that's just the way that these problems get written. That's not to say that it won't happen, okay? All right, that's it for the notes.